God's chosen ones. You were different even in the womb. Before your parents gave you a name, before the world measured your worth by grades or talent, heaven had already written a name over your spirit, set apart. You were never born just to continue a family line. You were born to break the mold, disrupt the pattern, and become the interruption to every curse and limitation that plagued your bloodline. Look back, not with pain, but with clarity. You didn't fit in at school. You didn't speak like the others, think like the others, act like the others. Even in your own family, you were the question mark, the one that couldn't be explained away. You were called too sensitive, too deep, too intense. But the truth is, you were too anointed to be ordinary, God's chosen one. There is a reason why you've always felt like the black sheep in a flock that shared your blood but not your spirit. You carry an ancient oil. You walk with a frequency that heaven recognizes and hell fears. You are the continuation of a covenant that began long before your great-grandparents ever knelt in prayer. That covenant was not tied to a surname, it was tied to a spiritual signature. You've always sensed something hovering over your life, a heaviness, a responsibility, a sacred weight. That wasn't depression. That was destiny pressing into your bones. It was the mantle of your calling, resting silently on your shoulders, even before you knew how to name it. Chosen one. You didn't stumble into this role. You were ushered into it by the Spirit of God. Even as a child, you were drawn to silence, to prayer, to visions. You could hear what others ignored. You felt pain, others hid. And no matter how chaotic your environment, something inside you kept whispering, there is more. There is purpose. Let me tell you something most people won't understand. Your womb season was not just biological, it was spiritual. The enemy tried to smother your identity before your lungs could even hold breath. The spiritual realm shifted when you were conceived, because heaven had just planted a deliverer inside a broken family tree. That's why your life has been under attack since day one. The enemy isn't threatened by normal. He's threatened by the chosen. And God didn't just mark your life. He isolated it. You've had to fight demons your family never warned you about. You've cried out in spiritual languages your own parents didn't understand. You've been delivered in private from generational curses that others simply called bad luck. But you know better. You know it was warfare, and you survived it. You are not a misfit. You are a mantle bearer. The burden you carry is the proof of the call. The silence you've walked through is the evidence of heaven's preparation. The rejection you faced wasn't punishment, it was protection. Because God doesn't let kings be raised in contaminated courts. You had to be different. You had to be strange. You had to be marked. Because the assignment on your life could not be shared. It had to be worn alone. And now you're waking up. Now you're remembering. Now the oil is starting to drip. Not just over your head, but through your words, your hands, your presence. It's no accident you're hearing this right now. This is your confirmation. This is your moment of remembrance. This is heaven pulling back the veil. You were never one of them. You were never meant to be. So when they mocked your quietness, God was cultivating discernment. When they laughed at your isolation, God was guarding the oil. When they questioned your difference, God was confirming your distinction. Chosen one. There is only one like you in your entire family. One spiritual gatekeeper. One divine interrupter. One remnant torchbearer. And it's you. And tonight, heaven is commissioning you again. Not with fanfare, not with applause, but with this whisper. The time is now. Stand in who you are. Take your place. The mantle is ready. Comment 111 below if you've always felt like the outcast, but now you know why. Like this message if you're ready to step into your destiny. Subscribe to this channel now to stay connected to what heaven is unfolding through you. You're not just hearing this, you were meant to. Because what's ahead will require your full awakening. You didn't fit in for a reason. And that reason wasn't rejection, it was redirection. From your earliest memories, you felt the edges of every room, the weight of unspoken words, the invisible tension between what others expected from you and what your spirit quietly knew was real. This was never about rebellion. It was about resonance. Your spirit didn't resonate with what was around you because it was always tuned to something higher. You saw things others overlooked. You questioned what others accepted. You noticed injustice, hypocrisy, and spiritual emptiness, even in places labeled family, not because you were judgmental, but because your spirit wouldn't let you settle. The environment that trained your body never touched your soul. You were surrounded by people who thought blood meant belonging. But your soul already knew this journey would require a different kind of bond. The truth is, God never intended for you to walk like the rest. When heaven calls someone to be a chosen one in a family, it requires an uprooting. He begins by severing the false dependencies that could entangle your purpose. That's why the places you were supposed to feel most secure often became the most confusing. You didn't get to grow up in peace, you grew up in pressure. Because pressure forge purpose. That divine discomfort, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. You were being separated from everything that could contaminate your call. Not because you were better, but because you were burdened. Burdened with vision. Burdened with purpose. Burdened with spiritual responsibility. The moment God set you apart, He started weaning you off the need for approval. Because people called to break generational patterns cannot crave generational affirmation. There were birthdays that didn't feel like celebrations, achievements that went unnoticed, breakdowns that were met with silence. And in all of it, something inside you whispered, "You're not crazy, you're wholesome." They don't see you because you were never meant to be seen by them. You were being hidden by God, not rejected by man. This is why the family structure felt like a mismatch. Your spirit was drawn to other realms while your body sat at family dinners with people who could never understand why your presence made them uncomfortable. Not because you were offensive, but because your light exposed their shadows. Your silence held more truth than their loud opinions. Your presence alone carried a weight that shifted the room. You were raised among them, but you weren't built like them. And when you tried to shrink yourself to keep the peace, heaven resisted. Because your destiny cannot fit in a costume stitched by tradition, you weren't born to carry their approval, you were born to carry the ark. This is why the path of the chosen one feels lonely. Because heaven assigned you a mission before your family ever gave you a title. You may be someone's son, daughter, sibling, or cousin, but your true identity is spiritual. You were called to be a door, not a decoration. A pilar, not a participant. God placed you in your bloodline, not to blend in, but to rebuild from the ruins. This rebuilding always begins with isolation, not because God wants to hurt you, but because He wants to preserve you. There are things He needed to show you in private that could never survive the noise of the crowd. He spoke to you in your tears. He taught you discernment through silence. He gave you wisdom through pain. And He hid your identity so the enemy couldn't sabotage what wasn't yet fully formed. You've survived things that should have shattered you. Emotional wounds that bled without witness. Spiritual battles no one ever prayed you through. And still, you rose. Still, you remained. Still, you believed quietly, consistently, stubbornly. That belief is not ordinary. That's not just faith. That's evidence. Evidence of a calling so ancient. It's etched into the marrow of your being. They said you were distant, you were detached. But in truth, you were discerning. You could feel what they dismissed. You could sense what they ignored. You were never meant to laugh at what grieved your spirit, or entertain what diluted your oil. You were never meant to be normal. Normalcy was never your portion, because heaven never calls normal people to do supernatural work. And now, as you look back, things are making sense. The dreams, the tears, the restless nights, the sense of not belonging, even in your own house. God was pulling you out so He could pour into you. He was removing the familiar so He could fill you with the eternal. Don't resent the distance. Don't grieve the misunderstanding. It all served your becoming. You are not a casualty of broken family dynamics. You are a carrier of divine reconstruction. Chosen one. You were never created to reflect the house you were raised in. You were created to reflect the kingdom you were sent from. That's why you didn't fit. That's why the structure around you couldn't hold the fire within you. Because what's coming from your life is meant to bless, redeem, and realign the very ones who didn't see you coming. And they still don't see it. But soon, they will. Being born into a family does not mean you carry the same spiritual assignment as the rest. This is where many become confused, thinking that bloodline equals calling, that shared DNA guarantees shared destiny. But God doesn't operate by biology alone. His plans run deeper than genetics. His covenant is spiritual, not inherited by accident of birth, but bestowed by divine intention. You were born in the same house as them, but you were not sent for the same reason. Look around your family. Some are gifted. Some are successful. Some are even spiritually aware. But there's only one who's been awakened by fire. Only one who cannot unsee what was revealed in the silence. Only one who wrestles at night, not with guilt or fear, but with purpose. You are that one, God's chosen ones. Don't just wake up one day and decide to carry a calling. No, they are appointed before they understand what that word even means. Your entire life has been a series of divine clues. A strange discomfort in familiar places. A quiet whisper to go left when everyone else goes right. An invisible hand holding you back when the crowd rushes forward. You've always walked at a different rhythm because heaven was writing a different song over your life. And that's why your journey has been so misunderstood. You weren't being rebellious. You were being rerouted. You weren't trying to stand out. You were trying to survive the storm of misalignment that follows every chosen one who doesn't yet know their name. You carry something sacred, and sacred things are not handled carelessly. You carry vision. But the family you were born into might only value survival. You dream of healing generations, and they think you're trying to shame the past. You speak of freedom, and they think you're trying to leave them behind. But the truth is, you were never trying to escape them, you were trying to obey God. That obedience costs more when it's misunderstood, especially by those closest to you. But the ones who misunderstand the assignment are often not equipped to carry it. They may have loved you, raised you, even tried to shape you, but the shaping of a chosen one belongs to God alone. That's why He never let their words define you. That's why even their validation could never silence your deeper knowing. Have you ever wondered why? In a house of many voices, only yours sees what others ignore. Why only you feel a pressing sense of urgency? Why only you cry at night for a family that laughs through its brokenness? It's because God gave you the spiritual sight that others were never meant to carry. He opened your eyes not to condemn them, but to intercede for them. He gave you discernment, not to distance yourself in pride, but to step forward in love, carrying the oil that will eventually cleanse what others tried to conceal. But before he could send you back, he had to bring you out. He had to train you differently, strip you deeply, and raise you up far from the noise of familiarity. You've been set apart, not to feel superior, but to become effective. There is no room for ego in this assignment. You didn't ask for it. You didn't earn it. But it is yours nonetheless. And with it comes a responsibility that cannot be shared. That's why you're the only one in your family who prays the way you do, who dreams the way you do, who fasts, who forgives, who keeps returning to the altar, not just for yourself, but for everyone who doesn't even realize how close they are to spiritual ruin. You are not better. You are burdened. You are not chosen because of your strength. You are chosen because of your surrender. And when the oil is real, it isolates before it activates. People think being chosen means being celebrated. No, it often means being questioned, misread, misrepresented, especially by those who should have protected you. Because people bound by logic cannot comprehend those led by the Spirit. You can't expect those who walk by sight to understand someone walking by vision. And you can't be upset when the mantle you carry makes others feel the weight of their own unawakened potential. God didn't make you the chosen one because you were the oldest, the smartest, the most religious, or the most loved. He made you the chosen one because he needed someone who would say yes, someone who would feel the burden and not run, someone who would carry the oil, even when it meant being overlooked, someone who would go deeper while others stayed comfortable, someone who would keep praying, even when the answers didn't come. You are that someone, and that's why there is only one chosen one in each family. Not because God is unfair, but because the oil is heavy, the vision is costly, the calling is sacred. It cannot be shared. It must be guarded. If there were two, the responsibility would be diluted. The warfare would be divided. The lineage would be confused. But with one, the line is clear. The assignment is focused. The heavens know who to pour into, and the earth knows who to oppose. Chosen one. You are heaven's investment in your family's future. You are the living proof that God has not forgotten your bloodline. You are the evidence of mercy, the echo of intercession, the bridge between bondage and breakthrough. You may feel out of place, but you are deeply in purpose. And while others search for their place in the family, you've already been given a position in eternity. You are the seed. You are the key. You are the remnant. You are the repairer of the breach. Comment 777 below if you've ever felt the weight of this truth deep in your soul. There is always a cost for carrying something divine, and for the chosen one in every family, that cost is separation. Not physical distance alone, but spiritual detachment from what once felt familiar and safe. This isn't punishment. It's positioning. When heaven chooses you to disrupt generations of bondage, cycles, and silence, it doesn't place you in comfort. It places you in contrast. That's why your relationships with your family members have always felt misaligned. You love them, but you feel out of sync. You try to speak truth, and it lands like an offense. You attempt to offer light, but it's perceived as pride. You set boundaries, and they call it rebellion. But beneath it all, what's really happening is this. Your elevation is exposing the limitations they've grown comfortable with. The calling on your life created a tension. You didn't ask for it. You didn't chase it. But from the moment you were spiritually awakened, the room changed. Conversations that once flowed freely now feel forced. Traditions that once brought laughter now stir unease. Not because you're trying to separate yourself, but because God already has. There are things you cannot entertain anymore. Places you can no longer go. Habits you had to drop. Language you had to unlearn. You used to sit in those same circles, hear those same jokes, nod along to those same mindsets, but now your spirit won't let you settle. What once seemed harmless now grieves your soul. That's what the cost of the mantle looks like. It's not just about carrying the responsibility to intercede, it's about carrying the grief of understanding. You see their pain, but they call you judgmental. You feel their spiritual hunger, but they accuse you of being distant. You discern their wounds, but they say you're acting self-righteous. The truth is, you're not rejecting them. You're being repositioned by God to reach them differently. And that difference, it's necessary. God could not allow you to be entangled in the same mindset. He called you to transform. He couldn't let you conform to the very systems He intends to dismantle through you. You were never meant to preserve your family's traditions. You were meant to birth something new in its place. A new sound, a new standard, a new level of freedom. That's why you've had to walk alone. Not because you're unlovable, but because you're untouchable in the spirit until your formation is complete. The deeper the oil, the longer the press, the higher the calling, the more precise the pruning, the louder the assignment, the quieter the preparation. And it hurts, doesn't it? The silence, the loneliness, the inner conflict of loving people who don't recognize what you're becoming. You sit at the same table but feel like you're in a different world. You hug them, laugh with them, show up for them, but something inside knows you can't stay where they are. It's not arrogance, it's assignment. You've tried to explain your growth, tried to bridge the spiritual divide, tried to soften your walk to keep the peace. But you can't shrink a calling this large, and you can't dilute an oil this holy. Your life is not just a testimony in the making, it's a deliverance in process. What God is doing in you will echo for generations. This is why He set you apart. Because someone had to rise. Someone had to refuse to continue the cycles of poverty, fear, religion without revelation, broken marriages, emotional suppression, addiction, silence, and shame. Someone had to be the turning point. Someone had to take the hit in private so that those who come after you can live in peace publicly. And that someone is you. When others were distracted, you were discerning. When others were chasing approval, you were chasing truth. When others laughed off the dysfunction, you carried it to the altar. That weight didn't break you, it built you. But the building was lonely, because isolation is God's workshop for the chosen. And maybe, for a while, you thought something was wrong with you, that you were too sensitive, too serious, too intense. But the truth is, you were too awakened to play along. You were too aligned to pretend. God was developing you while others were distracted. He was deepening you, while others stayed surface. That's what it means to be chosen. Not just selected, but sanctified, set apart, marked. Not better, just burdened. Not perfect, just purposed. The cost of separation is real. It may not always come with open wounds, but it leaves invisible scars, the kind that remind you of conversations you can no longer have, the kind that whisper how lonely it feels to see what others can't. But in that space, God meets you. It reminds you, this isn't exile, it's elevation. He whispers to your spirit, I had to do it this way, because if you blended in, you would have buried your light. If you were accepted too quickly, you would have surrendered too soon. But I needed a vessel that would hold the oil without leaking, and that's why I brought you out. You've been set apart, not just to rise, but to return. One day, the very ones who questioned your silence will need your wisdom. The ones who mocked your spiritual fire will seek its warmth. The ones who didn't understand your boundaries will depend on your clarity. And when that time comes, you won't return with bitterness. You'll return with oil. You are carrying something far greater than your own healing. You are carrying breakthrough for your entire bloodline. When God chooses someone in a family, He doesn't choose at random. He doesn't look for the most gifted, the most educated, or the most loved. He looks for the one who is willing to carry the weight of spiritual responsibility. He looks for the one who will not just break free, but break others free too. And when He finds that one, He pours out the oil not for comfort, but for commission. That's you. You are the one anointed to confront what everyone else learned to tolerate. You are the one who said, it ends with me. The addiction, the shame, the fear, the silence, the cycles of self-sabotage, none of it will make it past you. Because your life isn't just about survival. Your life is a generational reset. You are the divine interruption to the dysfunction. And it's not easy. You've been carrying things in prayer that others don't even know how to name. You've been fasting while they feasted. You've been weeping in secret for breakthroughs that will bless people who may never thank you. But your obedience isn't for applause. It's for alignment. You didn't choose this burden. It chose you. But you didn't run. You stood your ground. You wrestled through the midnight hours. You walked through rejection, through misunderstanding, through deep inner warfare. You kept showing up, even when your knees trembled and your heart ached, because something in you knew, if I give up, the whole line suffers. That's what it means to be chosen. It means being trusted with burdens others could not bear. It means becoming a bridge between what was and what will be. And it means being the first, sometimes the only one to say, yes. And maybe your yes didn't look impressive. Maybe you whispered it through tears. Maybe you said it while shaking. But heaven heard it as thunder, because when a chosen one agrees with God's will, the earth begins to shift. You've been sent to tear down altars that were never meant to stand. You've been sent to rebuild identity from the ashes of generational silence. You've been sent to establish new patterns of faith, love, boldness, and truth. That's why your prayers carry such weight. That's why your tears birth change. You're not just praying for yourself. You're standing in the gap. God has been molding you into the kind of intercessor who breaks through barriers not by volume, but by authority. Your voice in the Spirit shakes things your family has been bound by for decades. The things that tormented your parents will fear your name. The lies that silenced your grandparents will break at your truth. The generational chains that once felt permanent will shatter at your obedience. But don't be surprised when the warfare increases. Don't be caught off guard when the pressure intensifies. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. The greater the calling, the deeper, the crushing. That crushing has a purpose. It's not just forming endurance. It's extracting oil. Because oil doesn't come from casually living. It comes from surrender. From saying yes when you could have said no. From staying when walking away would have been easier. From choosing forgiveness when you had every right to be bitter. From trusting God with what you don't understand, again and again. This is what separates the chosen one from the rest of the family, not just the ability to see what's wrong, but the courage to do something about it. Not just the awareness of pain, but the authority to shift the spiritual climate and declare, no more. You are the bloodline breaker. You are the curse destroyer. You are the healing the family didn't know how to pray for. So stop questioning why you were born into the chaos. Stop doubting whether you have what it takes. The fact that you're still standing proves that grace is carrying you, and if grace brought you this far, it will finish what it started. You may not have had a blueprint, but God gave you vision. You may not have had support, but heaven assigned angels to your path. You may not have been affirmed by those around you, but you've been validated by the one who called you. And the best part, you won't just break the cycle, you'll build something new. Your obedience will become the foundation for your children's freedom. Your choices will shift the atmosphere in homes you haven't even walked into yet. Your legacy will be liberty. You will be misunderstood, but you will also be unmatched. You will be rejected, but you will also be remembered. Not for your comfort, but for your courage. Because you didn't just survive what others bowed to, you broke it. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel if this message is speaking directly to your spirit. Stay connected, because what God is about to do through your life is only just beginning. You are the one heaven trusted. They never saw you coming, and that was by design. From the beginning, your light was hidden in plain sight. You grew up in the same rooms, ate from the same table, had heard the same stories, but deep down, you knew your soul was tuned to something else. You weren't louder. You weren't better. You were just different. You carried something sacred, and God concealed it until the appointed time. People often expect the chosen one to rise with recognition. They think the evidence of favor will be visible from day one. But God doesn't reveal what He's still refining. So while others were being celebrated for what was seen, you were being developed in secret. Because sacred things require secrecy. Oil is pressed in private. Gold is refined in fire, not on display. And that's why you were overlooked, misunderstood, ignored. They didn't see the way you sensed things, how you could walk into a room and feel the spiritual climate shift. They didn't understand why you questioned the traditions no one else dared to challenge. Why you wept during moments that seemed normal to everyone else. Why your heart broke for things others called acceptable. You weren't dramatic. You were discerning. And discernment is dangerous to people who live in denial. They couldn't see your light because it would have demanded they confront their own darkness. So instead, they pretended not to notice. They labeled you sensitive, moody, overly spiritual. But deep down, your presence made things tremble even in silence. You carried a frequency their spirits couldn't ignore, even if their minds refused to acknowledge it. That invisibility wasn't an accident. It was God's strategy. He hid you while He formed you. He concealed your gifting while He solidified your character. He allowed you to walk through rooms unseen so that your identity wouldn't be shaped by applause. Because you were never meant to rise by validation. You were meant to rise by revelation. And the revelation is this: you were hidden, not because you were unworthy, but because you were being prepared. If they had seen you too soon, they would have mishandled you. If they had affirmed you prematurely, they would have shaped you according to their own limitations. But God needed your identity to be rooted in Him, not in opinions, not in applause, not in comparison. That's why the early years were marked by silence, so you would learn to recognize God's voice before you ever depended on another's. You learned how to walk by faith when no one was watching. You learned how to pray without an audience. You learned how to seek God when answers didn't come easily. And now, the season of hiding is lifting, not because you've earned it, but because the timing is right. What was once hidden is now being revealed. Slowly, carefully, intentionally. You are stepping into rooms you once felt unworthy of. You are opening your mouth in ways you once feared. You are walking in a strength you didn't know you had. That's not pride, that's prophetic timing. They still may not recognize you. Some may pretend they don't see the shift. Others may try to remind you of who you used to be. But don't shrink. Don't apologize. Don't go back to hiding. Because the one they couldn't see is now the one God is sending. And He's sending you with oil. Not to boast, but to bless. Not to punish, but to pour. You are not returning with resentment. You are returning with revelation. You see them clearly now. You see the wounds behind their words, the patterns behind their pride. And though they didn't recognize you, you now recognize what they need. And God is trusting you to carry it with grace. This is why you had to be hidden, so that when the time came, you would walk, not in arrogance, but in authority. You are not just seen, you are sent. So when they ask, why now? When they say, where did this come from? When they whisper, who do they think they are? You'll know the answer. You'll feel the fire. And you'll remember, the light was always there. It was just covered. For a time. But now the veil is lifting. Comment 777 if you've ever felt invisible in your own house, your own family, your own world, yet, deep down, something told you were born for more. You weren't unseen. You were being safeguarded. And now, the world will see what heaven has always known. You didn't inherit the blessings, but the responsibility found you. Anyway, while others were praised and protected, you were being positioned. While they received comfort, you received clarity. And now, you understand. You weren't left out. You were lifted out. Not to rise in pride, but to rise in purpose. Because the calling on your life was never about being the favorite in your family. It was about becoming the foundation. The truth is hard. You didn't inherit the wealth, the wisdom, or the spiritual guidance that could have made your path easier. You weren't handed a legacy, you were handed a battlefield. But that battlefield became your training ground. You learned how to war in silence. You learned how to pray through pain. You learned how to listen for God when no one around you could even recognize His voice. And somehow, without a map, you kept moving forward. You didn't have a spiritual mentor at the dinner table. You didn't grow up in a sanctuary of healing words. You didn't always see love modeled well. But despite the absence, your soul kept pressing deeper. You didn't inherit a strong foundation, but God gave you the hammer to build one, and build it you did. In the quiet, in the struggle, in the nights of not knowing what tomorrow would bring, you made altars out of empty rooms. You sanctified the space you were given. You began constructing with what others discarded. Because your spirit knew, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? You didn't receive the ease, but you received the endurance. Others inherited family names, resources, or respect. You inherited the burden to rebuild. You became the first in your line to say, "This will not pass on. This ends with me." And that kind of declaration doesn't come from convenience. It comes from conviction, the kind that's been forged in fire. So don't envy what others received. Don't covet the paths that looked smoother. You were never sent to walk an easy road. You were sent to walk the sacred one. And the sacred road is narrow. It's lonely. It's marked by misunderstanding, but it's also paved with favor. You carry what others ignored, the spiritual responsibility that no one wanted, the prayer life, the discernment, the intercession, the emotional intelligence, the resilience. It all found you. And though you didn't ask for it, you wear it well. Not because you're perfect, but because you're faithful. God saw that you could handle what others dropped, that you would say yes where others would have said no, that you would carry the oil when others chased the applause. That's why He allowed it all to fall into your lap, not as a curse, but as a commissioning. And now the weight you carry is turning into wings. You're rising not because they lifted you up, but because heaven backed you up. You're rising not with the inheritance of man, but with the authority of God. You're becoming the blueprint that never existed for you. You're laying down tracks that future generations will walk on with peace, not pain. So stop looking back with regret. Stop rehearsing what you didn't receive. You didn't inherit it, but you're building it. And what you're building is stronger than what anyone before you ever carried. Because you're not building from ego, you're building from surrender, from obedience, from reverence, from truth. You are not empty-handed. You're fully equipped. You have scars that became strategy. You have tears that became testimony. You have silence that became strength. And you have a Father in heaven who sees every unseen sacrifice, every uncelebrated victory, every quiet battle you never shared. He saw when you gave what you didn't have, when you stood firm with nothing but His word in your spirit and His name in your mouth. You didn't inherit the blessing, but through you, the blessing is being birthed. Don't resent the role. Don't run from the responsibility. Embrace it. It's not just falling on you, it's flowing through you. You are the root system heaven chose for this tree. And though you started with nothing but pain, you're about to see fruit that will feed generations. You are the gate God opened when everyone else thought the door was closed. And what you're building won't just bless your name, it will bless the ones who never said thank you. It will bless the ones who left you. It will bless the ones who misjudged you. Because your obedience was never about being understood. It was always about being aligned. You're not carrying leftovers. You're carrying legacy. You suffered silently, and not just for yourself. Many nights you lay awake, not because of your own battles, but because you felt the weight of others on your shoulders. You couldn't explain it. But you knew that when your mother cried in silence, her pain echoed in your chest. When your father shut down emotionally, you carried his silence like a stone. When your siblings wandered aimlessly, something in you kept interceding. Even before you knew the language of prayer. That wasn't empathy. That was spiritual inheritance. You were absorbing battles that didn't begin with you, but they were assigned to end with you. The enemy saw the call and tried to crush it through emotional exhaustion, through isolation, through confusion. But what he failed to realize is that the suffering only sharpened your discernment. The more you carried, the more you learned to recognize what was not of God. And though you wept in private, heaven counted every tear as intercession. You didn't just feel the pain, you felt the pressure, the unspoken expectations, the invisible obligations. You became the unacknowledged protector, the quiet anchor, the one who bore the storm without recognition. While others fell apart, you held it together. You always held it together, not because you were stronger, but because you were chosen. God entrusted you with this level of endurance, not to harm you, but to prepare you. He was building someone who could carry the oil and not break under the weight. Someone who could love deeply without being bitter. Someone who could see darkness without becoming cold. Someone who could walk through fire and still offer warmth. And now you know the pain was never pointless. You've been accused of being too emotional, too intense. But what they didn't understand is that your heart wasn't just yours. It was carrying decades of spiritual residue. You've been feeling the echoes of things passed down silently. The kind of weight that doesn't show up on your face but shows up in your spirit. You cried out for freedom from things you never committed. You fasted for breakthrough over sins you didn't choose. You asked for deliverance over patterns you didn't initiate. Because God marked you not just for healing, but for cleansing, for rewriting the narrative, for tearing down strongholds disguised as personality. And while they excused it as family traits, you saw it for what it was, spiritual bondage that needed to be broken. That's why you were born sensitive. Because God needed someone in the family who wouldn't normalize dysfunction, who would feel the heaviness, not as a curse, but as a call, who would notice what others dismissed. And that noticing became your first anointing. You didn't need a pulpit to become a minister. You ministered in your tears, in your silence, in your unseen sacrifices, and the heavens bore witness, even when no one else did. There were moments you wanted to let go. Moments you questioned if this was even fair. You saw others in your family live carelessly, speak recklessly, and carry no weight, and yet they thrived in the world's eyes. Meanwhile, you felt the crushing, the pruning, the constant push to grow, to surrender, to go deeper, and you wondered why. The answer is this: because you asked for change. Not with words, but with your hunger. Your spirit longed for something more, and God responded by sending you through the fire that would birth it. He knew that if He poured into you, you wouldn't hoard the oil. You would pour it back. You would share it. You would break it open to feed others. That's why He trusted you with pain. That's why He trusted you with burden. Because you would never let it be wasted. Now look at you. Not perfect, not unscarred, but powerful. You're not here by accident. You're here by design. And every battle you endured wasn't just to strengthen you, it was to shield the ones who couldn't bear it. Your life became a covering, a shelter, a place of spiritual insulation. They don't know it, but your yes protected them. Your intercession bought time for them. Your obedience paved a way they didn't even know they needed. And though you may not get the thank you, though you may never hear the apology, though your strength may remain invisible to the ones you carried, you can rest in this truth. Heaven saw it all, and heaven is keeping record. So don't let the silence make you question your worth. Don't let the lack of recognition convince you the suffering was in vain. You were never doing it for them. You were doing it for Him. and he has never overlooked your obedience. You are the keeper of what no one else could carry. You are the intercessor of a lineage that didn't understand its need for one. You are the soul that stood in the gap wounded. Yes, but still standing. And that standing has shaken hell more than you'll ever know. There is only one vessel, one oil, one assignment. God does not waste the anointing. He doesn't spread it across the family tree, hoping someone will step up. He chooses one. He fills one, and he refines one, because spiritual mantles are not group projects. They are personal appointments, weighted, costly, and deeply sacred. You are that vessel. You may have wondered why no one else felt the burden, why no one else prayed through the night, why no one else cried at the sound of worship, why no one else fasted without being told, or turned down what everyone else eagerly consumed. It's because the oil was never meant to be spread among them. It was meant to be entrusted to one fully, completely, without dilution. Heaven does not pour oil randomly. The weight of your calling is proof that you are the chosen vessel for your bloodline. This is why, when you tried to conform, something inside broke. When you tried to mirror others, your spirit recoiled. When you tried to live small, you felt spiritually starved. You weren't being stubborn. You were being preserved. You were born to carry something holy, and holy things don't fit inside systems of convenience. There is a spiritual law in effect here. One oil, one vessel. Because if the oil falls on a vessel that's not prepared, it leaks. And God has no intention of wasting what heaven labored to prepare. That's why the preparation has been so painful. Why the process felt longer than everyone else's. You weren't just being prepared for life. You were being prepared for legacy. This is why your isolation wasn't a detour. It was a design. God needed to strip away the noise so you could become a vessel that could handle pure oil. Not popularity, not performance, just oil, consecrated, refined, and undiluted. Others have gifts, others have talents, but you carry oil. And that oil, though invisible, is undeniable. When you speak, it shifts atmospheres. When you enter a room, demons grow restless, not because of your voice, but because of your presence. The kind of presence that comes from being crushed in secret. The kind of power that is born not from titles, but from tears. The kind of authority that can only come from surviving the fire and staying faithful through it all. There is only one in each family who walks like this. Not because God is unfair, but because he knows how rare it is to find a heart that says yes and keeps saying yes even when it costs everything. You are that one. You are the yes that heaven heard. And because of your yes, others will be free. The dreams that keep you awake, they aren't random. They're prophetic blueprints. The visions you receive, they're divine downloads. The sensitivity you walk in, it's not emotional fragility, it's spiritual alertness. You feel deeply because you're called to heal deeply. You discern quickly because you're assigned to lead swiftly. You may not have the accolades. You may not have the applause. But what you have cannot be bought. You carry heaven's oil. And oil doesn't just rest anywhere. It looks for vessels empty, yielded, obedient vessels. That's who you've become. So when people ask why you're different, why your life has taken such a different shape than your siblings or cousins or peers, the answer is clear. Because oil doesn't fall on crowds. It falls on covenant. And God made a covenant with you. You are the remnant, the exception, the breakthrough. You are the one who lives between generations, redeeming what was and building what's next. You were called to walk alone, not as punishment, but as preservation. Because if you walked with the crowd, you'd miss the weight. If you sought their approval, you'd dilute the anointing. But instead, you stood apart, and now the oil flows. And yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's costly, but it's also holy. So carry it, with reverence, with humility, with strength, because this oil you carry isn't just for you. It's for the healing of your house, for the rebuilding of your bloodline, for the resurrection of what was almost lost. And when the day comes that they finally see what's been on your life all along, you won't need to prove anything. The oil will speak. Comment 999. If you now realize the weight was never random, it was always assignment. It ends with you. Every generational curse, every cycle of silence, every hidden wound passed from one hand to the next, like an invisible inheritance, it ends here. Not through force, but through your faith. Not by accident, but by divine design. You are the line in the sand, the barrier between what was and what will never be again. You may not feel qualified, but heaven isn't looking for perfection. It's looking for agreement. And you, chosen one, have already agreed in your spirit, even if your lips haven't always known how to say yes. You've stood in the middle of storms that didn't belong to you. You've cried tears for things you didn't cause. And you've carried burdens no one acknowledged. That is the weight of being the first. The first to say, no more. The first to choose healing over hiding. The first to confront pain instead of passing it on. The first to stop running and start rebuilding. There's a holy finality resting on your life. A declaration that says, this ends with me. The trauma that was normalized, the anger that was inherited, the fear that became tradition, the spiritual blindness, the emotional neglect, all of it stops now, not by chance, but by the power of your obedience. But don't expect applause. Breaking generational patterns rarely comes with a parade. It comes with pressure, with resistance, with tension from the very people you're trying to free, because they've grown comfortable in what you're confronting. They've made peace with what you're called to tear down. So when you rise, don't expect them to rise with you. At least, not right away. Instead, expect spiritual turbulence. Expect relationships to shift. Expect silence from people who once applauded your compromise. Expect strange resistance, not because you're wrong, but because you're getting it right. You're realigning your family line with heaven's original intention. And that always provokes what has kept your house bound for generations. But don't retreat. Stand firm. Because your obedience is breaking chains that have wrapped around your bloodline for decades. Chains that have whispered lies through lullabies. Chains that have hardened hearts through habit. Chains that have taken root so deeply. The family stopped recognizing them as chains. But you saw them. You felt them. And now, you're destroying them. You are the first to choose deliverance over denial. You are the first to walk away from dysfunction without shame. You are the first to say, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's holy. And through that decision, heaven has moved. Not just around you, but through you. Your very presence has become disruptive in the spirit. Because where you go, strongholds tremble, not because of your volume, but because of your authority. You are heaven's rebuke to the enemy's foothold in your bloodline. You are the interruption he never saw coming. And though he tried to stop you through exhaustion, through distraction, through loneliness, you're still here. And that alone is proof that the grace on your life is greater than the grip of every generational curse. This is not just about you. This is about the ones coming after you. The children who will never have to pray for the things you had to war for. The households that will be built on peace, not pain. The marriages that will thrive because you chose to forgive what tried to poison your heart. The destinies that will bloom because you tilled the soil with tears. Don't despise the weight. It's producing generational freedom. Don't underestimate your presence. It's shifting atmospheres. And don't doubt the process. Because what looks like delay is actually deep work. The kind of work that ensures this freedom lasts. This is legacy not built on wealth, but on wholeness. Your legacy won't be written in material inheritance. It will be written in deliverance. In the sound of laughter in homes where there used to be yelling. In the silence of peace where there used to be fear. In the presence of faith where there used to be doubt. You are not just passing something down, you are passing something on. Something holy. Something eternal. Chosen one. This is your moment to rise fully into what you were born for. You didn't come this far just to get free. You came to set others free. You are the curse breaker. You are the restorer of walls. You are the one who returns the voice to a family that forgot how to pray. And yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's costly. But yes, it is worth it. Subscribe now, if this resonates with your spirit. This space is built for those carrying the kind of call the world doesn't recognize, but heaven fully endorses. What you're walking into requires alignment, not applause. And you'll find that here. You are the end of what broke them, and the beginning of what will heal them. There's a reason the tension never left your house. It wasn't always spoken, but you could feel it in the air. The low-level hostility, the invisible division, the spiritual heaviness that hovered over gatherings meant to feel like home. You sensed it when no one else did. You were the child who noticed the unspoken, the teenager who asked the questions no one wanted to answer, the adult who refused to play along with emotional games everyone else called family dynamics, because you were the only one who saw it clearly. There was brokenness hiding in plain sight, generational wounds disguised as personality traits, patterns recycled year after year, decade after decade, and while others normalized it, something in you resisted. You couldn't explain it, but your spirit simply refused to call dysfunction love. That resistance was not rebellion, it was recognition. You were recognizing that your spirit had been calibrated to a different standard. You were sensing what the rest of the family had learned to silence. And even when you tried to blend in, tried to laugh at what wasn't funny, tried to accept what felt wrong, you couldn't do it for long. Because truth always rises to the surface. And when God marks someone in a family to carry truth, He does not let them settle for tradition. He awakens them with discomfort. He stirs them through contradiction. He allows them to experience every fracture, not to break them, but to prepare them to rebuild. You saw the silent grief in your elders. You noticed the passive control in your caregivers. You felt the emptiness behind words of affection that carried no warmth. And because of that awareness, God assigned you not to repeat it, but to redeem it. That assignment made you the outsider, the one who didn't play along, the one who made others uncomfortable just by being present, the one who challenged what others defended. And in doing so, you became what every family needs but rarely understands in the moment. A disruptor of darkness, a disruptor of secrets, a disruptor of inherited shame. a disruptor of spiritual blindness. You didn't volunteer for this role. You were drafted, not by human hands, but by heaven's decree. And the weight you've carried in silence, it was never yours alone. It was the cry of a bloodline in need of healing, carried through the one vessel willing to remain open. You've walked through rejection that didn't make sense. You've been accused of things you never said. You've felt resistance in rooms where all you offered was peace. Not because you were wrong, but because your presence challenged the equilibrium of tolerated dysfunction. Don't internalize their reactions. Don't shrink, because they don't understand. You're not arrogant. You're awakened. And that awakening disrupts every spirit that benefits from spiritual slumber. You've been misunderstood, not because you were unclear, but because the truth you carry confronts spirits that have ruled your house for far too long. And here's what you need to know. Confrontation is not cruelty. Jesus disrupted every environment he entered. He didn't cater to the comfort of the religious. He didn't walk around dysfunction. He went straight through it, healing, cleansing, revealing. And so will you, because the oil on your life doesn't just bring peace, it brings exposure. You will expose what they've hidden. You will stir what they've buried. You will awaken what they silenced. And in time, they will see that what felt like division was actually deliverance in disguise. Because your refusal to conform gave the entire family a new frame. Your unwillingness to play along created space for truth to breathe. Your decision to confront pain instead of performing peace made healing a possibility for the first time in generations. You are not the problem. You are the pattern breaker. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's frustrating. But no, you're not alone. Heaven backs you. Angels surround you. God has not only called you, He has equipped you. And what you carry is not for arguments. It's for atmospheres. Don't waste time debating what you're designed to disrupt with presence. You don't need permission to be who God has called you to be. You don't need approval from the ones you were sent to deliver. You only need alignment. So keep speaking, even if your voice trembles. Keep standing, even when the room grows cold. Keep praying, even if no one joins in. Because your persistence is doing more than you can see. Your consistency is shaking spiritual ground. And your obedience is marking the walls of your family line with blood, the kind that says, "This house is covered. This house is turning." And it is. You are the shift. You are the hinge. You are the new beginning for a house that forgot how to hope. They never understood your dreams because they were never meant to. From a young age, you saw things differently. You imagined possibilities beyond your surroundings. You spoke of things that didn't exist yet. You carried vision in a house built only for survival, and that alone made you stand out. While others in your family were focused on making it through the week, you were thinking generations ahead. While they clung to what was safe, you were drawn to what was sacred. There was always something in you that reached beyond the ordinary, something that refused to settle, something that burned quietly beneath the surface until the day it could no longer be ignored. You spoke dreams they couldn't process. You had ideas they couldn't support, not because they were cruel, but because they were limited. They saw the world through the lens of pain, disappointment, and scarcity. You saw it through the lens of purpose. But even vision comes with a cost. Every time you tried to share what God was showing you, it was met with confusion, or worse, contempt. They laughed, rolled their eyes, questioned your motives. They tried to talk you down, not always out of malice, but out of fear. because your dreams reminded them of everything they stopped believing for. Your words stirred the hopes they buried, and buried hopes don't like being resurrected. You tried to shrink your vision to fit their understanding. You tried to simplify your calling to gain their approval. You tried to slow your pace so they wouldn't feel left behind. But all it did was delay your development, because you were never called to fit their frame. You were called to build a new one. They couldn't support your dreams because they didn't plant the seed. God did. And He didn't plant it in a conference or a church service. He planted it in the soil of your soul, deep, quiet, hidden from the noise. He watered it through isolation. He pruned it through pain. He nurtured it with every closed door and unanswered question. And now, that seed is pushing through the surface. And yes, it's going to make people uncomfortable. People don't like what they can't explain. They resist what they can't control. But your dream is not a rebellion, it's a revelation. It's the evidence that God has not given up on your family. He placed the blueprint in you. And now, you carry the burden of building something they've never seen. That's why your imagination was always so vivid. Why your ideas felt too big. Why your spirit couldn't settle in small talk and shallow rooms. God was developing a pioneer in a house built for settlers. You were wired for movement while they were anchored by fear. And it hurt. To be mocked for your creativity. To be silenced when you tried to share your heart. To be labeled as unrealistic, overly ambitious, or out of touch. But all that rejection only confirmed your distinction. Because pioneers always look crazy until what they build becomes undeniable. Don't resent their misunderstanding. Don't hold bitterness toward those who couldn't affirm what they were never called to carry. They didn't see it because it wasn't shown to them. It was shown to you, and it's your responsibility to protect it, steward it, and eventually walk it out. You weren't meant to wait for permission. You were meant to obey the vision. That vision may be spiritual. It may be creative. It may be a business, a ministry, a movement, a message, a way of life that shifts everything around you. But whatever it is, it's real, and it matters, because it was heaven sent and hell tested. You've survived too much to abandon it now. So stop explaining it to those who don't have the capacity to see it. Stop watering it down for the sake of peace. Stop looking backward for validation. You're not the same person who whispered dreams in dimly lit rooms, hoping someone would say, "I see it too." You're the one who sees it first. And that's enough. It's always been enough. Comment 333. If your dreams have always been too big for your house, but you kept dreaming anyway. You were never crazy. You were called. There is a reason the anointing causes division. The moment God places a mantle on your life, it doesn't just attract favor, it stirs resistance. And often, that resistance comes from the people closest to you, not always out of hatred, sometimes out of confusion, sometimes out of jealousy, but often out of spiritual discomfort. Even Jesus faced it. He stood in the synagogue of his hometown, the very place where he had grown up. He opened the scroll, declared the fulfillment of prophecy, and what did they do? They didn't celebrate him. They questioned him. Isn't this Joseph's son? They couldn't reconcile the child they once knew with the authority he now carried. And so, they rejected him. Not because his words weren't true, but because his growth challenged their memory. That's what the anointing does. It challenges memory. It disrupts comfort. It exposes every system, belief, and tradition that no longer carries truth. And in doing so, it creates tension. Not because you've changed, but because you're no longer pretending to stay the same. Your growth forces people to confront their stagnation. Your healing reveals their wounds. Your clarity exposes their confusion. And when that happens, don't be surprised when they distance themselves, when they label you, when they twist your words, when they question your motives. They aren't reacting to your personality. They're reacting to your power. The anointing on your life makes people feel things they don't know how to name. It surfaces what's hidden. It calls things out without you even saying a word. Because anointing isn't volume, it's vibration. It's the spiritual resonance that moves through a room and unsettles what darkness has tried to keep dormant. That's why you feel misunderstood. Not because you're speaking in riddles, but because your very presence is prophetic. You are a walking disruption to everything that's been falsely rooted in your family. And no, that won't always feel good. Especially when you love the ones who oppose you. When you've prayed for their healing, and they still resent your freedom. When you've extended grace, and they still respond with shade. When all you want is peace, and all they offer is distance. But understand this. Your anointing is not the problem. It's the exposure they can't explain. They remember your weaknesses. They replay your past. They cling to the version of you that made them feel comfortable. And now that you've stepped into clarity, into purpose, into authority, they don't know where to place you. And people will always reject what they can't categorize. Don't let it harden you. Let it purify you. Because the weight of the anointing must be balanced by the posture of humility. You're not called to prove anything. You're not called to fight for your place at tables that can't hold your calling. You're called to walk boldly, gently, consistently into what God has placed before you. And those who are meant to walk with you, they will. Those who are meant to receive from you, they'll recognize the oil in time. But until then, protect your peace. Guard your heart. Stay close to the one who anointed you in the first place. Because the same Spirit that called you will also cover you. You don't need to defend what heaven has already endorsed. You are not here to be popular. You are here to be powerful. So let the division happen. If it must. Let the misunderstanding rise. If it will. Let the distance form. If that's what the call requires. Because at the end of the day, you're not carrying the oil to gain approval. You're carrying it to break chains. And chains don't break in silence. They break in tension. Your life carries the kind of tension that births transformation. The kind that heaven uses to turn families around, to shift bloodlines, to redeem names. You're not just a child of your family, you are a reformer sent into it. Don't let their reactions fool you into thinking you're off course. You're not. You're exactly where God wants you, on the front lines of change. And change never comes without resistance. Stand firm. Move forward. And know that the anointing may divide for a season, but it will deliver in due time. You had to leave. Not because you were running from your family, your past, or your story, but because you couldn't rise while chained to what refused to grow. Every chosen vessel reaches a moment of divine separation, a moment when God calls you out, not to abandon your roots, but to develop your wings. And when that moment came, you didn't even recognize it at first. It wasn't marked by fireworks. It wasn't some loud declaration. It was a subtle shift, a growing discomfort, a divine dissatisfaction. Suddenly, the conversations that used to satisfy you felt hollow. The rhythms that once felt familiar began to feel restrictive. You weren't bitter. You were being beckoned. You weren't angry, you were being awakened. God was pulling you into the wilderness. Because every true assignment begins with separation. Abraham had to leave his father's house. Joseph had to leave the embrace of his brothers. David had to flee the familiar fields of his youth. Jesus had to depart his hometown. Not one of them left out of pride. They left out of obedience. So did you. There comes a point when you can no longer remain planted in soil that refuses to nourish your growth. When the people around you remember who you were but reject who you're becoming, and as painful as that may be, it's necessary. Because what God is developing in you requires air, space, and silence. You couldn't rise in a place that constantly reminded you who you used to be. Every time you began to stretch, something pulled you back. Every time you tried to shine, something dimmed your light. It wasn't always intentional, but it was real. And eventually, you had to choose comfort or calling. You chose calling, and that choice didn't come without cost. You walked away from familiarity, from shared history, from safety nets. You stepped into a season that felt empty, but what looked like emptiness was actually expansion. What felt like exile was actually elevation. Because sometimes God has to pull you out so He can pour into you. In the distance, He showed you who you are without the voices that tried to define you. In the quiet, He reintroduced you to yourself, not the version that played small, but the version He always saw, and that version needed room to breathe, to break, to bloom. Leaving wasn't abandonment, it was alignment. You didn't walk away from them. You walked toward Him, toward purpose, toward peace, toward the deeper places where your voice could rise without restraint, where your oil could flow without limitation, where your spirit could grow without suffocation. And the fruit proves it. You've become more whole, more honest, more holy. You've healed in ways that still shock you. You've forgiven what no one else even knew you held. You've released the need to be understood, and in doing so, you've found a deeper understanding of who God created you to be. But don't be surprised when they still talk, when they say you changed, when they question your loyalty, when they reduce your growth to offense or rebellion. They don't see the nights you wrestled with that decision. They don't see the prayers you cried over their names. They only see the distance and not the devotion it took to keep loving them while walking away. Let them talk. Because the same God who called you out will one day use you to lead others out too. But not yet. Not until you're fully formed. Not until the oil has been purified. Not until your identity is rooted deep enough to return without shrinking. For now, stay in the process. Let Him stretch you. Let Him sanctify you. Let Him finish what He started. And one day, when you walk back into those rooms, you won't carry apology. You'll carry authority. You won't be seeking approval. You'll be offering freedom. Because you didn't leave to escape, you left to evolve. And that evolution will become the very answer they didn't know how to ask for. Don't rush back to prove anything. Stay where God placed you. Heal, grow, thrive. And when the time comes to return, you'll know. Because you won't be returning for closure, you'll be returning with keys. Keys that unlock the next chapter for the house that once confined you. Keys that open doors for others, still living behind emotional bars. Keys that say, I didn't leave to forget. I left to remember who I am. You didn't walk away from love. You walked into legacy. You will be sent back, but not to fit in. God does not isolate you forever. He doesn't separate just to keep you hidden. He separates to strengthen. He hides to prepare. And when the time is right, when the oil has been refined, when the identity has been secured, when the voice is no longer shaken, he sends you back, but not as the version they remember. He sends you back as the one he formed in the fire. You won't return to blend in with the dysfunction. You won't return to take your old seat at the same table of silence. You'll return as a restorer, as a voice of clarity, as a walking answer to the questions they were too afraid to ask. You'll step into the same spaces, but you'll carry a different presence, one that cannot be denied, because what left was unfinished, but what returns is unstoppable. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, his brothers stripped him of his robe. But years later, when famine hit, and the same brothers came kneeling before him, they didn't recognize the boy they buried in betrayal. What stood before them wasn't their brother. It was a ruler, a redeemer, a deliverer. That's the story of the chosen one. You leave broken. You return whole. You leave questioned. You return with answers. You leave silent. You return with sound. But the return isn't about revenge. It's not about vindication. It's about redemption. God doesn't raise you to prove a point. He raises you to fulfill a purpose. And that purpose is bigger than your pain. It's bigger than your history. It's bigger than how they treated you. God will send you back to the very people who misread you, the ones who couldn't handle your difference, the ones who cast you as the outlier, and you'll have the chance to do what only true chosen ones can do. Bless what once rejected you, not because they earned it, but because you're free. That freedom is the proof of your transformation. You're not carrying bitterness, you're carrying breakthrough. You're not seeking closure, you're moving in commission. You're not operating from memory, you're operating from mantle. You'll know when it's time. Not because someone invites you back, not because an apology finally comes, but because God will say, now. And when he does, you'll go not with a need to be seen, but with a need to serve. You will pour into the very places that poured nothing into you. You will speak healing over the very wounds they ignored. You will carry light into rooms still dimmed by old thinking, and you'll do it with grace, with maturity, with a steadiness they've never seen before. That is the mark of true elevation, when you can return to the scene of the fracture, not with fury, but with fruit. Because fruit speaks. They may not say thank you. They may never fully understand, but they will see. They will feel the shift. They will sense the weight of who you've become. And whether they admit it or not, their spirit will know God was with you the whole time. And that knowing will spark something. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen through words, but your return will shift the atmosphere. It will plant seeds. It will break ground. You'll become the blueprint they never knew they needed, the example they never thought they'd follow, the miracle they watched grow quietly until it became undeniable. You will be sent back not to live their way, but to lead a new way. So walk humbly, but confidently, speak gently, but boldly, love deeply, but wisely, because you are no longer just the chosen one. You are the confirmation, the fulfillment, the proof that God raises up from among the rejected, that he heals in hidden places, that he sends oil through unlikely vessels, that he redeems houses that seemed lost forever. And if you've made it this far through the fire, through the pruning, through the silence, then you already carry what it takes to finish. Like, share, and subscribe if you know this is your assignment. You're not being called to fit in anymore. You're being called to lead, to shift, to restore. Comment 000 if you know you're called to redeem your house. You were born alone, and heaven crowned you in the secret place. No one saw it happen. There was no celebration, no gathering, no prophetic utterance echoing through the halls. It happened in silence between you and God. The world was unaware. Your family had no idea. But in the spiritual realm, a coronation took place, because God doesn't crown the chosen ones in public. He crowns them in caves. David was anointed before he was ever enthroned. He received oil in obscurity, long before he held a crown in front of a crowd. And so did you. The anointing came first. The recognition comes later. That's why you've often walked through life carrying weight others couldn't see. You've borne responsibility without a title. You've stood in gaps no one knew existed. You've cried over generations without being asked, because heaven commissioned you in private, and private appointments always precede public assignments. You are royalty in disguise, not with gold or grandeur, but with grit, with quiet obedience, with a heart that stayed soft even when life tried to harden it. You didn't need a robe to know you were chosen. You didn't need applause to know you were approved. God placed the crown on your spirit, and no man can remove what heaven has declared. The weight of that crown is not in status, it's in stewardship. You've been given authority over what others ignore. You've been given vision for things that don't yet exist. You've been handed spiritual keys to doors still hidden. And though you walk in rooms unnoticed, the Spirit recognizes the crown you wear. That's why the opposition has been so fierce. The enemy never fought you because of where you were. He fought you because of where you were headed. He recognized your royalty before you did. He saw the light on your life and tried to dim it with doubt, distraction, and delay. But every storm only refined your fire. And now, you know who you are. You don't need confirmation from man. You don't need their approval to move forward. You've learned to walk as one who has been seen by God. You've learned to speak from the seat of spiritual authority. You've learned to carry your assignment with dignity, even when it comes with misunderstanding. This is the life of a crowned one. There's no parade, no trophy, just the steady rhythm of purpose, the quiet confidence of alignment, the peace that comes from knowing your crown wasn't given by people, and it can't be taken by them either. And this is why heaven trusts you, because you never wore the crown as a weapon. You never used your anointing to dominate others. You've always returned to the secret place, always bowed before the one who crowned you. That humility, that reverence is why the oil continues to flow. You were born alone because the journey required singular focus. You were crowned in secret because the noise would have corrupted the process. You were called in silence so that when you speak, heaven responds. And now you stand not in ego, but in assurance. Not in pride, but in posture. You're not here to be seen, you're here to serve. You're not chasing platforms, you're carrying presence. And that presence will go before you. It will make crooked paths straight. It will open doors no man can shut. It will silence every accusation, expose every counterfeit, and confirm everything God has ever whispered to your spirit in the midnight hour. You may have been born alone, but you were never abandoned. God was with you in the crib and in the cave, in the crowd and in the crushing, in the silence and in the shouting. He's been writing your story all along. And now, you're stepping into chapters written in boldness and glory. Let them say what they want. Let them wonder how you rose. Let them question where your strength comes from. The answer is simple. You wear what heaven placed. and you wear it well. They don't know it, but your prayers have saved them more times than they can count. While they slept, you interceded. While they argued, you were fasting. While they avoided truth, you cried out to God for mercy. You've stood between judgment and grace, acting as the spiritual shield for a house that didn't even realize it was at war. You are the covering. You've gone before them in the spirit. You've seen attacks coming before they ever manifested. You've broken assignments they never knew were forming. You've cried out for deliverance they didn't even know they needed. And though they didn't ask, and rarely thanked you, you stayed on the wall. You stood watch like a silent guardian, not because you were obligated, but because you were chosen. Chosen not just to receive revelation, but to respond to it. Chosen not just to survive the battle, but to pray through it. Chosen to bear their names before the throne of heaven with groans too deep for words. And God heard you, every whisper in the midnight hour, every name you called out through tears, every Lord, have mercy, you said, while they rolled their eyes. Every moment you pleaded for protection, even after they dishonored your presence. Heaven has recorded every petition. The angels have stood at attention every time you opened your mouth in intercession. And because of that, things didn't go the way the enemy planned. Because of that, destruction passed them by. Because of that, grace interrupted cycles they never knew had started. You are the spiritual backbone of your family. They don't understand it. They don't see it. But you know the pressure in your chest when something is off. You know the burden that won't let you sleep until you've prayed through. You know the warfare that rises out of nowhere because your prayers are touching dimensions they've never entered. You've been the voice behind closed doors, the tear on the floorboards, the silence before the breakthrough. You've carried the weight of generations with no audience but God, and He is pleased. Not because you were flawless, but because you were faithful. You didn't wait for recognition to show up for your assignment. You didn't wait for applause to walk in authority. You just kept praying. Even when they mocked you, even when they ignored you, even when they said you were too deep, too spiritual, too serious, you kept praying. And because you did, their lives were spared more than once. Their minds were preserved. Their children were covered. Their homes were blessed. Not because of their discipline, but because of your devotion. You are the family's hidden intercessor, and in the eyes of heaven, that makes you mighty. Don't ever let their silence make you feel small. Don't ever let their pride make you pull back. You may be quiet in the natural, but you're thunder in the spirit. You shake things. You move things. You call things into alignment. And you do it all without needing a platform, a microphone, or a title. That's what makes you dangerous to hell and precious to God. You are proof that one person fully surrendered can change the course of a bloodline. Your prayers are legacy. Your worship is warfare. Your consistency is covenant. So lift your head, wipe your tears, and know this: you were assigned to this house, not to be seen but to stand, not to be served but to serve, not to blend but to bless. And in due time, they'll realize what your presence truly meant. One day, their eyes will open, and they'll say, "We didn't understand then, but thank God for the one who prayed." You've made it to the end, but in truth, this is only the beginning. The road of the chosen one is long, stretching beyond what's visible, beyond what others will ever understand. It's a path walked in prayer, in private pain, in prophetic vision, and in unwavering faith. And if you've felt the weight of every word in this message, it's because your soul recognizes what your spirit has always known. You were called for this. You are not here by chance. You are not hearing these words by coincidence. You are part of a divine strategy written long before your birth, one that heaven is still unfolding through your life. The battles you've faced were never random. The silence was never wasted. The pain was never pointless. God has been writing a story through you that will echo long after you're gone, a story of restoration, redemption, and resurrection for your entire bloodline. And though this path is narrow, you are not walking it alone. Heaven walks with you. The Spirit of God surrounds you. And now, you are also connected to a greater remnant, a tribe of others who carry this same oil, this same burden, this same fire. If you know deep in your spirit that this is who you are, that you've been the hidden intercessor, the unseen covering, the one who stood when no one saw, then declare it. Comment 888 below as a prophetic act of alignment. Let the number mark the confirmation of your calling. And don't walk alone any longer. Subscribe to this channel now to stay rooted in this revelation. Like and share this message so others can find the language for what they've been carrying in silence. You were never invisible. You were anointed.